really fucking hard to be really true to yourself. And when you do what you love, you inspire other people to do what they love. And so I truly believe that if more people did what they love, it would change the world. This bucket list starts to become this journey of self-discovery where we are slowly learning about who we are by following these big and small dreams and understanding what are the things that energize us to be the truest version of ourselves.
What would your life have been if you actually had a bucket list journal when you were going through some of your dark days?
Because I was living the dream, but I wasn't living my dream. So the journal would force me to think and slow down enough to think, okay, what do I really want?
We have a New York Times best-selling author, Ben Nemtin.
What do you want to do before you die? And with that, we made the most epic bucket list of all time.
We're gonna die soon. You know, what if we could do anything, what would it be? So we decided to hit the road for 2 weeks, one summer, before we went back to school, and go after this list.
What do you want to do before you die?
Welcome to the Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your oasis, your destination to be all things just a little bit more brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. So my big question for you is, can you find the possible from the impossible? And what are your thoughts around how living for you is actually not selfish? Well, my guest today is none other than the incredible Ben Nemtin. He is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of What Do You Want to Do Before You Die? And the Bucket List Journal. Ben is ranked the #2 motivational speaker in the world by global gurus and starred in The Buried Life, MTV's highest rated show on iTunes and Amazon. And he's the co-founder of the Buried Life movement. Ben's message of radical possibility has been featured on The Today Show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, Fox, and NBC News. And even President Obama called Ben and The Buried Life inspiration for a new generation. And Oprah declared their mission truly inspiring. So without further ado, this week we are talking about, in this episode, what stops most people from going after their biggest dreams. You guys, it's 2024. It's time to LFG. So what do you think your struggles can be, and what are some of those strengths? So what's next on that bucket list, and how to actually create your bucket list, and so much more. So let's bring on Ben Nemtin to the Brave Table.
I'm here. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here in studio with me in Los Angeles. You just came back from a keynote. How did it go?
It was great. Actually, so it was for a big accounting firm.
Okay.
And this actually never happened before. The first half, I have a lot of visuals for my keynote photos, videos. The first half of the keynote, the screens weren't working.
Oh,
and this is like a high level crowd, executives of like Fortune 100 companies, and there's always something that goes on, and like sometimes there's a technical glitch. I've never had it happen for this long. So I'm like telling the story. I'm waiting for. I have all these photos for my story and video.
Of course.
And so finally, I have to kind of get them to do a little bit of a breakout as I go back to the AV table and troubleshoot it with them. And it all worked out. And at the end of the day, people always, they appreciate when you roll with the punches. And so it ended up not being a complete failure. So that was good. But yeah, it's, you're doing it live. So
you're doing it live, and it's like, all right, that sucked, but now what?
Exactly.
And here we go.
Mm-hmm.
And you are, when people talk about motivational speakers, you're up there. And how has that been for you? And what, I want to go back into the origin story of Ben and what prompted kind of this entire movement, because here I have in my hands, and for those of you who've been watching this on YouTube, I actually have the bucket list journal. But what preceded all of this to where you are today?
So I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia.
It's a beautiful place.
Yes, it is, especially on the West Coast and on the islands there. Incredible place to grow up. And I used to still do, but I used to really put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed. So my parents never put pressure on me, but I always, really wanted to do well. And I also, I think I wanted to be liked by people. So that's why I really pushed myself to do well in sport. I was on the national rugby team at the under 19 age group. I had an academic scholarship. I was very, wanting to do well.
Were you the oldest, youngest?
I was the oldest. Yep.
Okay.
Still am the oldest. Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
So we were training. I think what happened was I always was in control, right? And I figured out school and I figured out sport. And I think when you always are in control and you have your first moment where you get out into the world and you realize that you can't control everything, sometimes you have a breakdown. And so I had my first mental health crisis was when I was in first year university. And I was training for the World Cup and I started getting anxiety around my performance at the World Cup. I started losing sleep and I started to have anxiety and I got depressed and I couldn't go to school and I couldn't go to practice. So I dropped out of school, got dropped from the team, and I went from someone who was very A-type, loved being with friends, to someone who couldn't leave the house. And I didn't see any future for myself because I had never been through anything like this. And all of a sudden, everything that I'd worked so hard for was suddenly gone. And so it was a very scary time for me. I didn't get why this was happening.
And were you like isolating yourself at this point? Did you go to your parents? Did you have people around you?
Yeah, I was shut in my parents' house. Yeah, they were trying everything. Friends would come over, but I just slowly became a recluse. I dropped out of school. I got dropped from the team. So I was just, I couldn't, my parents would force me to go for a 15-minute walk. And a lot of times I would just go and hide in the driveway and then I'd come back. So I was very crippled by this depression. And it got to the point where my friends literally pulled me out of the house, brought me with them to a new town for the summer after I dropped out of school. They went to a new town for the summer to work. And I was forced to do things that I didn't want to do, but ultimately led me to this road of recovery. So I was forced to get a job to pay for rent. So I started to feel some confidence. I was forced to talk about what I was going through because I had to talk to my friends about what was going on. And I realized that I wasn't the only one that had experienced some of these feelings. And I was forced to meet new people. And suddenly I met these new kids that were inspiring. I met kids that had traveled. I met kids that had, they were creative and they would just think of something and then do it. I met kids that really gave me energy. And I realized, okay, some people give me energy, some people draw energy from me, and I needed to be around people that gave me energy. So I made this commitment. After that summer away, I was starting to feel back to myself. I was like, okay, I'm only going to surround myself with people that inspire me. And there was one kid that inspired me, and it was this kid from the neighborhood that was a filmmaker. And secretly, deep down, I had always wanted to make a movie. And I thought it'd be so fun to make a show with my friends or make a documentary with my friends. And so I called him up and I said, hey, we should make a movie. And we got two other friends and we started talking about making this film, but we had no idea what it was going to be. And serendipitously, one of these friends got assigned a poem in English class at university. And the poem was called The Buried Life. And The Buried Life was a 150-year-old poem that talked about how the day-to-day buries your dreams. And you have these moments when you're inspired to go after them, but this monotony and other expectations or requirements or things that you have to do slowly bury them. And we thought, that's how we feel. We have all these things that we want to do, but we've never done them because they're buried. And here's this guy that wrote this poem 150 years ago in England. He felt like this. We feel like this. Okay, let's call this film The Buried Life. So we borrowed the name and we're like, let's make a list of all of our buried dreams. And let's pretend we have all the money in the world. Let's pretend that we have the ability to do everything, anything. What would you do? And we really had to like go through these iterations of this bucket list, which it ended up being, and come from the mind frame like, no. If anything's possible, what would you do? So we just kept kind of leveling it up to the most outrageous dreams we had ever thought of. Never thinking we would do any of them, but we'd just be like, it'd be fun to try. And then we thought, well, if we're gonna have any shot of doing any of these, we're gonna need the help of other people. So every time we cross something off our list, let's help a stranger we meet cross something off their bucket list. Keep in mind, this is back in 2006. This is 17 years ago.
Wow.
So pre-social media,
Yep.
we're just going on a 2-week road trip to tackle our bucket list and help other people in a borrowed RV with a camera on eBay in British Columbia.
Oh my God.
And we beg, borrow, and steal to get this thing off the ground. We throw parties as fundraisers. We pretend we have a production company to get sponsors on board. We do whatever we can to get enough money for gas and food and hit the road. And so we leave Vancouver Island in summer of 2006. And people started to hear about it. And then all these emails started coming. People said, I saw your bucket list online. I can help you ride a bull. I can help you get up in a hot air balloon. I can help you make a toast at a stranger's wedding. And then people sent us their dreams, asking for our help. So all of a sudden we have this flood of emails. And we're like, holy shit, what's going on? Like, this is crazy. And then it's national news. And then it's international news. And all of a sudden, there's this tidal wave of support and people sending us their dreams. And so we come back from that 2-week road trip. We're like, well, we got to keep doing this. Go back to school, work a job throughout the school year, fundraise throughout the school year, get bigger companies on board. And this 2-week road trip ends up lasting 10, 15 years.
Oh my gosh.
And
From a single idea.
From a 2-week road trip. And this idea, this bucket list starts to become this journey of self-discovery where we are slowly learning about who we are by following these big and small dreams and understanding what are the things that energize us to be the truest version of ourselves.
Well, and I want to kind of stop you there because I have the bucket list journal here. And in the journal itself, you actually have some of the things that you had written and crossed off of your list. And because this became such a huge movement, so have a beer with Prince Harry. That was done.
Check.
Play ball with President Obama.
Check.
Wow. Okay. Solve a crime or capture a fugitive.
Elementary, my dear Watson. Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah, we actually this was crazy. We convinced a bounty hunter to allow us to come with him to catch a fugitive, someone that skipped bail.
Okay.
So we went with him and basically knocked on doors and arrested someone, found someone that had skipped bail. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Officiate a wedding.
Yes, my sister's wedding I officiated. Yep.
Oh my goodness. Be interviewed by Oprah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Incredible. Write a sketch with Will Ferrell.
This is a funny one. This is one of the only ones that we crossed off by technicality because we found ourselves in a box at a Seattle Seahawks game.
Okay.
And Will Ferrell was there. And I was with one of my friends. And we thought, okay, this is our only shot to do this. But we didn't really want to completely disrupt his full, NFL experience of watching the game. So we're like, okay, how do we do this? And so we went up to him and said, listen, we're doing this project of about 100 things to do before you die. One of the things on the list is to do a sketch with you. And we're wondering if we can draw a sketch with you. So he's thought it was really funny. So we drew a sketch with him. And that's how we crossed off. So technically, we did a sketch with Will Ferrell.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. I mean, you had the bravado, the bravery to go up to him to even ask.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have said no.
He could have said no.
And he didn't. So what I'm actually gathering from all this is, so often we write our biggest goals and our biggest dreams, but what you're actually, in this whole movement that you've created is let's get creative with some of the pursuits. And take us through how you've kind of organized this journal, because it's not just, it is your bucket list, but there's several different avenues. And so can you just kind of share how it's organized, because it's done so well?
Thank you. I just find it helpful to have a process to a lot, I like structure. And I think that's overwhelming to think about all of your goals and dreams and passions and your purpose just by looking at a blank page and thinking, okay, what are all the things I want to do in my life? And I also think that people often overlook really important categories of life when they're thinking about their goals. Namely, the regrets that you have on your deathbed. So if you look at the top 5 regrets of the dying from Bronnie Ware's book, who is a palliative care nurse, book's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. It's a great name.
It's a great book.
They're not necessarily, well, they're not actually travel and adventure, which is what we think of when we think of a bucket list. We think adventure, travel, skydive, bungee jump, travel Europe. And so adventure and travel is one category of life, but there are so many other things that you tend to push under the rug because life gets so busy and get buried. So those are, how do you want to give back? Like what are your giving goals, relationship goals? One of the top 5 regrets of the dying is I wish I would have stayed in contact with friends. So what relationships are important to you? Creative goals. Creativity is like an often overlooked pillar of wellness where you get to express your true self. So you get to be in the state of flow and presence, which is therapeutic, but also allows you to express who you truly are. Intellectual goals. What do you want to learn? And then there's, mental health goals. And I think that there's also all of these things that we tend to put off because we don't think there's a deadline, like telling people how we really feel. Right. And that's another regret of the dying is I wish I would have had the courage to tell people how I really felt. I wish I had the courage to live for me. And so your list is really just this, it's almost, it's like your roadmap to living for yourself versus other people or the expectations of what you think other people have for you, which again is the top regret that people have at the end of their life. So by writing your list, not only does it force you to slow down to think about what those things are, but it also starts to make them real, because when you write them down, you take an idea that doesn't exist, you make it tangible. So that creates accountability. Now you have a physical reminder that these things exist, which is actually a step towards the right direction, because you create inspiration by taking a small step of action. And that's what you're trying to do with your list or with your goals or with your hobbies or with your passions, is not get overwhelmed by how do I achieve this? It's about taking the simplest step. And by taking that first simple step, you then just think about, okay, what's the next step? And slowly you start to create your own inspiration through action, and the mood follows that action. So then you start to feel the inspiration versus waiting to feel inspired, which means you're probably going to be waiting for a long time. And so writing your list is just the first step. That's just the easiest thing. You just get it down on paper. You're like, okay, now what? And then there's these things that you can continue to do to create more accountability to drive you forward, like sharing it. When you talk about your list, then you feel accountable to the people you shared it with. Create a deadline or a reward for yourself. So the bucket list journal, the idea is first write your list in 10 categories. So you have a well-rounded sort of representation of what you want.
And it's crazy that you have 10 categories. I mean, that's very specific.
Yeah. Yeah, they just felt to be all of the sort of aspects of who I am, right? What are the things that I want to think about? And then after you write those 10 categories, you learn about the barriers. So if you look at the research, there's 3 main barriers.
I see. So tell me about the first 2, because I have my page opened up to the third one.
Yeah. So the first 2 are, I mentioned it, it's the problem is there's no deadlines for these goals. So you have to create accountability. So how do you create accountability? You write your goals down. You share your goals. In the journal, you set a deadline. You set a reward for yourself. You choose an accountability buddy. That's the biggest. If you tell me I want to run a marathon and I want you to be my training partner, you're going to have a higher chance of running the marathon if I am training with you, because when you don't feel like training, I show up at the door to run and you're like, okay, shit, I got to go.
Right.
You're going to probably continue to go through the process because you don't want to let me down, right? And that is what we have in the workplace, is all these systems of accountability. We have leaders to keep us accountable. Salary keeps us accountable. Don't want to let down our team, keeps us accountable. Accountability really works. It really works. And we feel like we have to do it alone, but when you enroll someone, you're going to have, statistically, you're 77% more likely to achieve your goal if you send someone regular updates or if you have someone checking in with you. So that's just big advantage if you can enroll an accountability buddy. And so
and there's like statistics that say you're more likely to let yourself down if you're just making a commitment to yourself versus doing it with a buddy, because you'll never let that person down.
Right, exactly. So, which actually kind of ties into the biggest barrier, which is the fear of what other people think, or the fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about that is you can use that to your advantage by talking about it and by enrolling an accountability buddy, because you don't want them. You have this fear of, what if I look bad? I told them I was going to do it, now I'm not. Whereas if you don't do that, then that fear stops you, because you're like, oh, what if I do it and I fail?
Right.
I don't even want to try.
Yeah. What if I do it and I fail? So therefore, I don't even want to write that down, because that might be too big or too audacious or too much that I don't know if I myself can actually live up to that. Because, and what I love about what you created in this, you put your full list of 100 things that you want to do before you die. And most of them you've done. And obviously there's so much in scripting and visualization and manifestation that's like such a big buzzword. But it's almost like, I mean, there's okay, you want to go to space, so 99 and 100 is not done yet. But for everybody, and you want to host Saturday Night Live, I see that coming. But I think to have the vulnerability to fully share it and have this printed, I think it gives people a lot of inspiration to say, well, if he's going to have these big, audacious, hairy goals and he's been able to do it, then why can't I?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole idea, is that there's no difference between me and anyone else. You know, it's just that when we were young, dumb, and broke enough to try in the beginning, and we found that people wanted to help. And no one can help you if you don't share. You're on your own. Well,
did you come across any barriers to entry in the beginning of this journey? And what were some of them?
Yeah, like the short story, you know, makes it feel just like it was kind of a rocket ship and just everything happened. But it's like, when you really dig into it, and it's, you know, it's a 17-year-old story, there's many, many moments of failure, and there's a few more depressions that I went through. You know, we ended up getting offered a show in Canada, and we turned it down because they wanted to own it. We wanted to be executive producers. They wanted, you know, they could recast us, like it wasn't going to be ours. So we turned it down, and we raised all this money, and we filmed this whole nother tour. And then we came back to finish the documentary, and we realized how expensive post-production was, and we didn't have enough. And I had to go back and start working in a bar, and I didn't even bartend. It was just an absolute, it was so crushing, because we'd given up a show opportunity. Now no one was going to see this documentary, and no one would even know what we had done, right? And we wouldn't. And the whole goal of this whole project was to inspire our friends to do the things that they wanted to do. And now none of our friends would ever see it. And so for a year and a half, 2 years, we were just kind of trying to figure out what to do with this. And we ended up taking the footage and cutting a pilot. And then I met someone that knew someone in LA, and someone gave me a buddy pass, a free flight down to LA. And over a year and a half, I started to learn the entertainment business and realized, oh, you need an agent, and then you need a production company. And so we just figured out how to get this in front of MTV, basically, over a year and a half.
Wow.
And we had cut this pilot of us crashing the MTV Video Awards. We got into the awards dressed in these matching women's power suits, and pretended we were filming a secret pilot, and forged an email from the CEO of MTV to get in. And it was this crazy.
You crashed the MTV Awards.
Yes, in Vegas. It was wild. We got in and we got out, and then we made this pilot. Ironically, you know, we pretended we were filming a secret pilot, which ultimately ended up being our pilot to make the show. So we sold the show to MTV, but we were then executive producers. That was our caveat with selling the show. It was like, we need to be in creative control. So anyways, there's like this really, and then there was all these challenges with making the show because we wanted to do a show that was actually real.
Yeah.
So at that point, this is like a decade ago, reality was scripted. And so we wanted to make it real. So we had
like
to
actually real.
Yeah, we had to really like fight for that. And it's been this up and down journey of figuring out how we can stay true to that true original course, which is from the Buried Life poem, which is like tracking your true original course, which is what I've realized this whole journey has been about. As I mentioned before, it's not about the big accomplishments. It's about staying true to who you are. Because when you are who you truly are authentically, then you unlock the gifts that only you have, and therefore you can make the impact that only you can make. And I think we all have a responsibility to unlock those gifts, because you're the only person that can do what you do. And if you don't, then I think the ghosts of those dreams and the ghosts of those goals that you never acted on, the things you didn't do, those ghosts will come back to you on your deathbed. And they're going to be like, hey, we came to you when you're alive and you didn't do the thing. And so now we come back to die with you forever. And no one will experience your gifts, and no one will experience the potential that you have to create that impact that you can create. So I think we actually have a responsibility to try. And it doesn't matter if you fail. It's not about the goal. It's about the action. It's about doing, because you inspire people by doing the thing. It doesn't really matter what happens. Just the act of going after it, the pursuit, inspires other people to do their thing. Yeah. So by people seeing you do this podcast, they think, oh shit, Neeta did it. Like, maybe I can do it. And then they do their thing. And so that's what we started to see, was all of these people, first a couple people in the beginning, then a couple more, and then thousands and hundreds of thousands of people going after their dream just because we were going after ours. And then we realized, oh shit, there's this ripple effect that's created when you do what you love. You inspire other people to do what they love. And so I truly believe that if more people did what they love, it would change the world. Not in just like this kind of, we're all like skipping through meadows with flowers and rainbows.
Like a Bollywood movie.
Yeah, but it's like more about, I believe, and this is backed by research, there's a big correlation between purpose and well-being, right? So anytime I get depressed, it is because, in large part, a big area of my life is not aligned with who I truly am. Could be a relationship, could be the work I'm doing, could be another big piece of my pie chart. I'm not authentically being true to myself. And that suppression of who I am causes depression. And I think a lot of people are feeling these feelings of depression because they are not expressing that true self. Now, this is a complicated discussion, and I'm not saying that this is the only thing that people are. There's no golden bullet, right? But I do believe, and this is my experience, that when I have gotten depressed, it's my body telling me that I need to change something in my life. And therapy has been the biggest driver of change when it comes to my own mental health. Right. So I think that trumps everything. And I think this is outside of mental illness, where there's medication and psychiatry and other forms of therapy. All of those things are important. But I'm just saying, my experience has been changing and becoming aligned with who I truly am. And so that's why I think if more people do what they love, it would change the world.
I mean, it's brilliant. And I'm so glad you touched on this, because you already answered my question around this topic, but I kind of want to even just double click on it a little bit more in this mental health epidemic that we have been in. What do you think, for anybody that's like listening to this episode, watching this episode, what are some of the steps that they can start doing to express more of what they may or may not be subconsciously suppressing, causing these feelings of angst, overwhelm, anxiety, depression?
I think if you're feeling depression or anxiety or any type of negative feelings, I think the most important thing is try and talk with a professional about it. A therapist, or somebody that has experience with navigating these feelings, and know that there's no shame in feeling that way. This is the human experience. We'll all go through some sort of mental health crisis in our life, and this is likely your body trying to tell you something, and you are going to learn about yourself. That discomfort will ultimately be growth. If you can't talk with a therapist, talk with somebody that cares about you, that loves you. And just by talking about it, it will help start to break it down. It might become a little less scary when you verbalize it, and it's not just in your head. And I think that it's very difficult to go through your first mental health crisis because you've never experienced it. So you think you're broken. Right? You feel like you've lost who you are. When I first got depressed, I thought it was over. I was like, I will never be this person that I was. I used to be so outgoing. I used to be so much fun. I used to be smart. Like, your brain doesn't work. You can't be out in public. You lose the ability to be social, and you're in a fog and you can't sleep, right? And you're like, that's it. I'm done. But the reality is, you haven't lost any of those qualities. And this is really important for anyone that's listening that may feel like they have lost who they are. You haven't lost any of those qualities. You've just lost touch with those qualities. They are still in you, and you will be able to tap into those qualities again because they're part of who you are. You just are not able to access them right now. And that's very important because it's overwhelming and it's hard to think that you have lost that version of yourself. And that's just not the truth. You will come back to who you were. And then what you need to think about is think about the analogy of building a house. Okay. Like, changing the way you feel is not fast. It's not a quick process. It's incremental change. You need to do things that you know are good for you, even if you don't feel the effects. So that means, as I said, talking about things you're going through, exercise, getting enough sleep, getting out in nature. I have this mental health toolkit, which are all things that I utilize when I feel stuck. And these are all in the toolkit. Purpose is in the toolkit because of the correlation between well-being and mental health. Do things that give you a sense of purpose, or follow energy, like what excites you, what makes you feel more alive. And sometimes nothing does when you're depressed, but just then what used to, like, just force yourself to do these things that you know are good for you. And just like building a house, brick by brick, you lay the first brick, it doesn't do anything. You haven't built the house. Second brick, you haven't done anything. But over time, slowly, you'll start to feel better. So you have to commit just doing the small things every day that you know are good for you. And I guarantee slowly you will start to feel better. It's the same. I mean, just look at, weight loss, working out.
Right.
Like, you go to the gym, you have a great workout. You're like, oh shit, nothing happened. I just feel fucking sore, right? But you do it again and again because you know that over time it's gonna make a difference. Same with your emotions. It just takes time. And so just keep chugging away. You will feel better if you keep doing those things that are good for you.
I feel like you've just shared so many valuable mic drop moments. It's like, it's incredible. I mean, it's no wonder you're number 2 motivational speaker. I mean, I'm like, yes, I'm pumped. I'm like ready to start this new year. And well, I guess one of my questions is, what would your life have been if you actually had the bucket list journal when you were going through some of your dark days?
I think that, I really used it. If I really honestly sat down, I needed my friends to force me to do it, right? I think that's why this decision that changed my life was making a conscious decision to surround myself with people that inspired me. because they inspired me to do all this, right? And if I didn't have that accountability of the 3 other friends to force me to do these things or to even create this, I just wouldn't have done it. So the journal, I'm hoping, can create some of that accountability in lieu of that. But I do think it's very important for you to lean into relationships that inspire you and energize you to feel more alive, and distance yourself from other people that drain energy from you. Yeah. And we can talk about how to do that if we want, but just to your question, I think that when I wrote my list, it was the first time in my life that I declared what I wanted. Because before, I didn't even know I wasn't living for me, because I was living the dream. I had an academic scholarship. I was on the national rugby team. You know, I had a great group of friends. Why did I get this crippling depression? Because I was living the dream, but I wasn't living my dream. And that's the distinction. I think a lot of people don't even know that they're not living for them. So the journal would force me to think and slow down enough to think, okay, what do I really want? And that's something that you or I just didn't do, because I was so caught up in doing things for the validation of other people.
Same.
And that's what was so important to me back then.
Well, and I think that, you know, unless you have some sort of that breakdown, you don't recognize that you're living for somebody else, because that's all you knew. And you were getting that validation and love. At least for me, it was like all of the accolades and, you know, the piano recitals and the medals of winning the dance competitions, and the validation that, you know, my dad and my mom were like telling all their friends that, look at, she won, you know, this again. And so it was that constant, but then we're not filling ourselves and our cups up, you know, first, and we're not filling them up at all, because we're just taking out all the external. And I feel like even in this society and like this day and age of social media, we're getting the external validation with all the likes, and then we forget how to pour into our internal cup. And I feel like what you've created is just it's so huge. And to even have this, first of all, where can we even get the bucket list journal? Can you tell us more about it? Because I feel like this should be something everyone should be getting, to create that posse. I talk a lot about soul support posse, but to create your own posse and that connection, to deepen that connection with other people, and to have that accountability that you had, which you've actually created in this book, but how amazing it is to actually create it in unison with other people that you probably want to go deeper with.
Yeah, I think it's great to do with your partner or with your family. And it's a good conversation starter. So yeah, you can get it on Amazon. Just search the Bucket List Journal. You'll find it, or writeyourlist.com is where you can also get it.
Writeyourlist.com.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Writeyourlist.com. Okay. And where can we learn more of these inspirational, funny nuggets out of you? And by the way, you know, because you said you were going to host Saturday Night Live, I'll share with you. And we were talking about this before we hit record. Yeah. We said that I was going to do my, you know, comedy set in 24. So I'm going to share it on the Brave Table.
I love it.
You'll be my accountability buddy, and maybe you'll get closer to your dream of hosting Saturday Night Live.
That's right. Maybe I'll pick up some tips. That's great. When did you when did you make that goal? And you've done a couple improv classes? Or?
So I did improv about a decade ago after that was one of the tools and the things that I did after my first marriage. And, you know, kind of like fell into pieces. But then I did something that I was even more terrified, which was stand up. And this was at Second City. Oof. And I knew that all the Second Cityers, their dreams was to be on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And I was just doing it just to get out of my own comfort level of like public speaking and making fun of myself and all of the things. And then I did it again when I was pregnant with my son, actually. And then never completed, like you're supposed to do a performance in front of everyone, just never did it. Guess it wasn't the time, but now it is.
Yeah, that's terrifying. It is. I've done stand-up as well. It's like, it's fucking scary. Yeah, it is scary. Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you
I'll
too.
Be there. I'll be there I did it once. You've done it twice. You're going to do it again.
I mean, well, we'll see. Yeah. But so this is how we're supposed to do it. To share.
Yeah. The more people to share with, the more accountable you feel, you know?
There you go.
And the idea is you want to have people around you that push you forward, that enable you to get there versus sort of cut the legs out from underneath you. And those are the inspiring people. That's also in that sort of definition. They want you to win. They prop you up versus say like, yeah, it's not going to happen.
Right.
And so I think it's important to kind of just be aware of that so that you can really surround yourself with those people that are really going to drive you forward. So yeah, good for you. That'll be good. I'll be there.
Okay. Well, there you go. Accountability. All right. So as we get into our igniting round, what does it mean to be brave?
I think to be brave is to be, no surprise, to be true to yourself. I think that is the ultimate form of self-love and bravery, because it's really hard. It's really fucking hard to be really true to yourself. Mm-hmm. You have to take risks. You have to make sometimes really difficult decisions and choices, which that might be leaving a career or leaving a relationship or moving or leaving breaking away from the expectations of your parents or people around you or what society wants for you. And the proof that this is so hard is this regret that 76% of people have, which is, I wish I would have lived for me. Mm. So 3/4 of the population lay on their deathbed and reflect on their life, and they're like, fuck, I didn't even live for me. Like, what a travesty. That is, when I heard that statistic, I was like, why are more people not talking about this? And that's why I started speaking, because I was like, more people need to wake up and think about their death and where they're going to be on their deathbed so that they can live their life in a way that is aligned and have the perspective. And I don't think we think about death enough. And I think it's it's the most important thing we can think about. Yeah. It's the only thing we can count on. We think about everything else, which you can't count on. The only thing in your life that you know for sure will happen is you are going to die. You don't know when. And maybe if you're lucky, you'll live 70, 80, 90, 100, but you're going to die, right? And that is a liberating idea because it forces you to look at, okay, and then if I know I'm going to die, how am I going to live? And to be true to yourself in your life, I think is a constant battle. It's a constant battle. It's getting to know who you are. So you also have to do the work, which means facing that discomfort and looking inward and really figuring out who you are, because then you can live true to yourself. But if you don't know who you are, which I think is why most people aren't, then how do you live true to yourself? So you have to really go in, and that's hard. And then you have to sometimes make really hard choices. But ultimately, the pain you feel is not bad, right? The pain you feel is short term. The long-term gain is this abundance of life that unfolds for you just effortlessly. And you experience this flow of life. And when you experience that flow of life, that means you're aligned with who you truly are. That's what I believe.
It's huge. It's huge if more people live that way. This abundance of even freedom. And I love how you've just circled it back. So what is one word that describes this era of life for you?
It's alignment. It's definitely alignment. Yeah. It's alignment in my relationship with my partner. And that's the word that keeps coming up. And alignment with who I am and with the work that I'm doing. And that is obviously very aligned with the truth of who you truly are. So it's sort of the same thing, but that's the word.
There it is. There it is. Ben, this was such an incredible, insightful, amazing, and obviously motivated experience to have you here in studio in LA. And I can see why so many people have you in their arenas, their stadiums, their organizations, to have you come and speak, because it is just everything that you've done. I feel like you're just a true embodiment of the work that you'd had to do to kind of get out of that situation and to kind of keep coming back and like self-reflect, but also now put it in a tangible piece for all of us to continue to do our bucket list and to go big and to actually reverse engineer so that we can live a great life. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for having me. We did it.
We did it. Until next time on the Brave Table.
When we take things personally, we think it's an attack on our worth. And I noticed this with some of the relatives when we would have and interact around that the women had a particular expectation.